We cannot help but to throw around the term the greatest of all time. And not only do we love to throw that term around, we love to throw that term around one day after every single pay-per-view. And it never misses. And I'm not finger pointing at you guys. I might be pointing a finger at you guys, but I'm pointing three back right at myself. We have something known as a recency bias. Not only do we have a recency bias, but the sport is growing at such a rapid rate and pace right now that from week to week and month to month, you might actually be seeing a better fighter than you saw just 30 days ago. I think that's a little less of the case, and I think recency bias is a little bit more of the case, but the talk around Jon Jones being the greatest of all time has been around for a while. So maybe it's a little bit different after you have a Jon Jones fight and you see him dig deep like that and you see him push through. Now look, Jon Jones is dynamic. Jon Jones is tougher than all hell. If you were to have a conversation on who the toughest fighter of all time is, I think you would have a very difficult time, particularly after what we just saw Jon do with Reyes, not saying Jon Jones is the toughest fighter of all time. You would also have a leg to stand on to just come out and say he's the best. You would have a leg to stand on. He has never been put in a position he does not want to be in. He controls positions in fights. Even at times when he's on his feet and he's taken some licks, he has chosen to be in that position. Jon Jones has never been taken down and held there against their will. He's never been armbarred and triangled and tapped out. And no, I don't want to hear in the comment section about the Vitor fight where Vitor swung into an armbar. I got it, I misspoke. But the point is this. You would have a leg to stand on to say that Jon is the greatest of all time. I would be very surprised if he won that debate if he was up against Georges St-Pierre. Georges St-Pierre not only had a longer career that was unblemished and no asterisks and no embarrassment, but I don't know that any of those things get to qualify. I don't know if those things, because now you're talking about popular opinion, just go, well, George sure was a great guy. I don't know that being a great guy allows an objective conversation on simply who was the best. I don't know that it does. But those kind of things would come up, and if you're just arguing and debating, somebody's going to bring that to the table. So if you're choosing to take Jon's side and you're just having a friendly debate, you're going to have a counter for that. But here's the thing that George has, okay, that nobody else has ever had, including Jon, and that Jon can't get as long as he keeps fighting. So possibly it's unfair to Jon, but it exists all the same. Georges St-Pierre beat everybody of his time. Some of them he even had to go back and beat a second time over. Georges St-Pierre beat all the guys of yester time. The Sean Shirks of the world, the BJ Penns of the world, the Matt Hugheses of the world. But here's where things get tricky. Georges St-Pierre then beat the next generation. When Georges St-Pierre walked out against Johnny Hendricks and left that belt behind, the UFC went and found the next two best things they could. Johnny Hendricks was one of them, and Johnny Hendricks became the champion of the world. So George beat yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Now this is the one right here, tomorrow. That's the one that as long as Jon is still competing, he simply doesn't qualify for. That's not fair. That's not fair to Jon. But it is something that Jon can get back. Someday Jon will be done competing. And if Jon goes out on his own, likely Jon will go out like everybody else, flat on your back and embarrassed. But if he doesn't, if Jon does X amount, whatever his goal is, however many more years that is, and is still king and steps away, and one of the guys that he beat along the way comes along, picks up the title, and creates an era for himself, Jon will then have fulfilled the hat trick. All three. Yesterday, today, tomorrow. That's the spot that George sits in. That's the spot that nobody else qualifies for. I don't know of anybody else that can represent two of the three prongs. I know a lot of guys that can beat all of the guys of their time. That's what being a world champion is all about. You kind of got to be lucky to even be given an opportunity to have the guys of previous time. Now, Jon did. Jon had the Rampages and the Rashad Evans and the Chael Sonnens. John did all of those things. He definitely beat the guys of today. Until he steps away, he won't qualify for that third pro. See where it becomes a trick? See where it becomes very unfair to John? But all the same, this is just a conversation and a debate, and it's a debate about legacy. So it kind of has to happen post facto. So I think that when you bring John into the conversation, you brought the right guy. You definitely brought the right guy. But I don't think you're going to bring the winner. You're still stuck with George, who after retire and return changed weight classes, of which he had to eat just to get up to, still didn't make the fulfilled weight, still all bloated and big and everything, was still 2 pounds under and still left with the championship. And now would like to come back and have a third crack at yet a different crown. I mean, it's just a different thing. It's just a different thing. Khabib is one of these guys as well. Khabib has the greatest record in the history of the sport. Khabib has been the most dominant of anybody in the history of the sport, and I will define that dominance. Most guys can either win a fight or they can finish a fight, which of course they would also win, but they could finish a fight. But the question is, can you do both? Can you be built for speed? Can you be built for show and for go? It's usually one or the other. When you have a guy like Khabib who goes the distance night after night, whether that's 3 rounds or 5 rounds, goes the distance night after night, now you start accumulating different records. There has never been an athlete in the sport. Are you ready for this one? Khabib has never been given this credit. I will be the first one to recognize this and to credit with Khabib, and MMA journalists should back me up because I'm right. Nobody in the history of mixed martial arts has more 10-8 rounds than Khabib. A 10-8 round is the sign of dominance. You can catch somebody and tap them out. You can catch somebody and knock them out. If you accumulate a 10-8 round, you just showed the absolute most dominance that there is, and you didn't have to catch anybody to do it. You didn't have to have Lady Luck on your side. You had to have grit and skill, look for finishes while advancing position. The 4 qualifications of the sport. The most dominant fighter in the history of the sport because of the 10-8 round differential between himself and the field is Khabib. He's also the champion of the world. He's also won so goddamn many fights I can't remember. I believe he's 28-0. There is a chance that son of a bitch is now somehow 29-0. Does at that point, does it matter? He's an undefeated champion of the world who has proven he is the most dominant fighter in the world, but he's not dynamic. He's not dynamic. He comes out, he does the same thing. He does it so well, nobody can stop it. He's never had to go to plan B. Why should he be graded down because of that? Why? Why should he have to be graded down? If he can take something and take it further than anybody else, why would he not be in the conversation for greatest ever? Let me tell you one of my forays into mixed martial arts, and I think that helped to influence what I just said to you guys. But one of my first forays, I joined a gym. The gym was called Performance Quest, later shortened to just simply Team Quest, which you guys have probably heard. Very legendary gym, Team Quest. But before it was Team Quest, it was Performance Quest. Randy Couture, who was the champion of the world, partnered with Dan Henderson, who was the Pride champion of the world. They started a gym. Their first member, me. It was just the 3 of us. But they named it Performance Quest, and we opened it to the public and started running it like a gym, and they're signing people up and taking monthly wages and teaching classes. I think you guys understand the gym model. But the reason that Randy wanted it named Performance Quest, as opposed to a martial arts system where you start with a white belt, you move to a blue belt, you advance to the brown belt, and you finish with a black belt. Well, the reason Randy didn't want that, no belt system, is he said, I don't give a damn what color your belt is. I only care what was the performance. Did you beat that guy up? That guy could have a black belt and you have no belt. Did you beat him up, yes or no? I don't care about the process. I don't even care about the technique. I do care about the performance. And that was the model and that was the motto of the original Team Quest days, of which I was there. So perhaps that has influenced me, but it's an influence that I got from the champion of the world. I think his opinion matters, and I think as you start to talk about the greatest of all time, and you exclude Khabib because he's not out there hitting spinning wheel, roundhouse, this or that, or double wrist lock, twister to a. Who cares? Is he performing better than anybody else that tried? Got to consider that.